All eyes are back on a Virginia courthouse where we have entered week 2 in the trial of President Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort. Today, Rick Gates, the prosecution's star witness, took the stand and testified under oath that he and Manafort were involved in criminal activity together. Gates, who has been described as Manafort's right-hand man, also admitted to embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars from his longtime business partner. Gates was originally charged as a co-conspirator in Manafort's case, but has been cooperating with Robert Mueller's investigation after pleading guilty to conspiracy and lying to the FBI. While the case will only be looking at Manafort's business dealings, Gates also worked with him on Donald Trump's presidential campaign as the deputy campaign chair. Gates stayed on the campaign even after Manafort left and played a significant role in the presidential transition. Today's court appearance was the first time that Gates and Manafort have been in the same room together since Gates made his plea deal. For more on all of this, I'm joined by Betsy Woodruff, politics reporter for the Daily Beast, and Ken Delaney, an NBC News national security reporter who was at the Alexandria courthouse today. Ken, let me start with you. And just in terms of the basics, the meat and potatoes here, what exactly is it that Gates was admitting to today?
To everything, Steve. It was really rather remarkable. I mean, we knew most of this was going to happen, but still, to see him walk into that courtroom, Paul Manafort's protege of 10 years, he worked for him from 2006 to 2016, and sit down at that witness stand just feet away from Paul Manafort was something incredible. And Manafort was staring him down, and Gates tended not to look in Manafort's direction. Nonetheless, he was a pretty calm and compelling witness. He was a little nervous, but he testified that he had been charged with Paul Manafort in these bank and tax fraud indictments, and he admitted that he was guilty of all those charges and that he had cut a deal with the prosecution to plead guilty to a lesser charge, a charge involving lying to the FBI, in exchange for a reduced sentence if he cooperated. He laid all that out. And then he also explained that in the course of this plea agreement, he had to admit everything else bad that he did, and that included something that the government didn't even know about, which is that he was embezzling money. He was stealing money from Paul Manafort while they were on this alleged crime spree, defrauding banks and committing tax evasion. Gates was putting his hand into the cookie jar in the form of bogus expense reports, essentially, and he said it was worth about a couple of $100,000. He was essentially taking advantage of his ability to wire money from Manafort's accounts and wiring money from overseas based on false expense accounts. So there was that. He also admitted some other lesser things, including even being 15 minutes late for a curfew. The point of all that, Steve, is that the prosecution wants no surprises when Gates is cross-examined. They want to confront the jury with everything that's bad about Gates and say, despite that, you should believe him, because essentially, if he lies on the stand now, this agreement is void and he's going to go to prison for a long time because he's already pleaded guilty. It was some pretty dramatic stuff, and it continues tomorrow, Steve.
Yeah, and that, Betsy, I guess that's the other thing. Ken says to be continued tomorrow. That's probably the suspense now. How will Gates, after admitting all this, how will he hold up under a cross-examination? There's probably a lot there that the Manafort side could hit him with.
That's right. It's going to be bruising, and additionally, it's going to be personal. There was significant friction several months back when Rick Gates was going through the process of deciding whether or not he was going to flip on Paul Manafort, whether he was going to essentially turn on a man who had been his business partner and boss for upwards of a decade. And at the time, that caused significant consternation on Manafort's team. There are reports that Manafort's team, up until the last moment, thought Gates was going to reject a plea deal. They thought he was going to tough it out, stand by Manafort, be sort of a loyal foot soldier, be the loyal colleague they had always perceived, though incorrectly, had always perceived him to be. But then at the last minute, sort of when push came to shove, Gates decided no, he was going to just cross the line, work with Mueller and his team, and sort of abandon, if you will, his former colleague. So this isn't just a question of legal machinations. This is also very much a personal issue for Gates, Manafort's legal team, Gates' legal team, and you can expect to see that come through as Gates faces cross-examination from Manafort's attorneys.
Yeah, Ken, I mean, just in terms of the human drama on this, I mean, I think of how many mafia movies have we seen where, somebody flips, they're in the courtroom, and there's that moment when they basically, they're staring, 20 feet away from the person they're flipping. What was that like? You say Manafort was staring him down. Just set the scene. We didn't have cameras in there. What was it like to watch those two together?
It was pretty dramatic. I mean, admittedly, it's hard for us in the courtroom to see Manafort because we're looking at the back of his head. But he seemed to be clearly staring Gates down, and Gates did not want to look at him. And I was told by one of our producers that during the break that Gates refused to look at Manafort, even though Manafort was staring at Gates. But let me make one other point, Steve, which is that even if Gates collapses on cross-examination and the jury doesn't believe a word that he says, the prosecution still has a very strong case against Paul Manafort, because this is a case about foreign bank accounts. And we had testimony from Manafort's bookkeepers and accountants that they had no idea that he had control of all these foreign bank accounts. They prepared his tax returns and said that there were no foreign bank accounts. That's a felony. And there's been reams of evidence that he was paying for all these luxury goods with money wired from Cyprus from foreign bank accounts. That had nothing to do with Gates. And the only defense so far that we've seen to that is that Manafort didn't realize it was a crime. He didn't realize he filled out the form incorrectly. So it's a strong case with or without Gates, Steve.
Yeah, and Betsy, we talk about this is not this case we're talking about right here. It's the finances. It's not to do with the campaign. But is there a connection there between what's being revealed, what might be revealed, the fate that might meet Paul Manafort in this trial, and the questions about his role in the campaign?
Perhaps the biggest revelation that we've received from this trial from Mueller's team is that what was initially believed to be a $10 million loan that Putin ally and Russian aluminum oligarch Oleg Deripaska made to Manafort wasn't actually a loan. It was actually, according to prosecutors, a payment of $10 million. Now, the fact that Deripaska made that significant payment to Manafort raises questions about the type of work Manafort was doing for Deripaska, any loyalties that might have been there, as well as additional frictions that existed between the man who would go on to be Trump's campaign chairman and a man who was very much in Putin's inner circle. Deripaska subsequently has sued Manafort and Gates, has said that he thought they mishandled or stole even some of the money that he paid them. So there's a lot of friction between those two men. And during the presidential campaign, reportedly, Manafort reached out to Deripaska World and suggested that potentially he would be willing to give Deripaska personal private updates on how the campaign was going. So any subsequent revelations that we get in this trial about Manafort's relationship with Deripaska, the types of loans and or payments Deripaska was making to Manafort when he was making those payments, those revelations could potentially have implications for the way we view the work that Manafort did when he was working on Trump's campaign.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.